Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Garrison Institute's live interactive webinar. Today, our guest is Leslie Booker. Booker brings her heart and wisdom to the intersection of Dharma, embodied wisdom, and social justice, an integration of ancient wisdom practices that supports us in navigating our modern world. She's spoken at Mind and Life's Institute's International Symposium, Contemplative Minds in Higher Education, Mindfulness in America, and Omega Institute's Mindfulness and Education conferences, along with pioneers of mindfulness such as John Kabat-Zinn, Dr. Daniel Siegel, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Booker's also been featured as a speaker and facilitator at the Fetzer Institute, Vassar and Pitzer Colleges, the Contemplative Sciences Nature at the University of Virginia. Booker started sharing practice with the vulnerable populations in 2005 and was a senior teacher and director of teacher trainings with the Lineage Project, where she worked with incarcerated and vulnerable youth for 10 years. During this time, she also facilitated a mindfulness and cognitive-based therapy intervention at Rikers Island from 2009 to 2011, a partnership between NYU and the National Institute of Health. Before we begin today's session, I'll go over a few logistical items about our gathering. We're on a Zoom webinar, so participant audio and video are turned off. You'll only see Booker and for the time being myself. For anyone unable to attend live, we are recording these sessions. You'll have a chance to view recordings on our YouTube channel, as well as a schedule of upcoming programs at garrisoninstitute.org. We offer these sessions free of charge as a goodwill gesture to support our community during such times of heightened uncertainty. We would welcome donations of any kind, in any amount, to help us continue to offer these sessions. Thank you. Finally, we'll have time for Q&A during this gathering. You can post your Q&A questions in the Q&A panel, which is accessible at the bottom of your screen by hovering your arrow over the Q&A button. You're welcome to post your questions at any time. We're on for an hour today and we'll respond to as many questions as we can. Please forgive us if we're unable to get to your question. And thank you again, Booker, for being with us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. And thank you so much, Amy, for that introduction. I'm happy to be with you all today. This is my first webinar. I've done a lot of teaching online, a lot of retreats and talks and courses, but I'm used to seeing a live audience. This is my first time just speaking directly to a camera during this time that we are in. So again, my name is Booker. I'm really happy to be with you all on this webinar, and it's called Tending to the Emotional Body, because I am living in an incredibly emotional body right now, as you might be as well. I think there are 98 people that are on this call live today, and many more who will be watching this later, because we're trying to figure out how to live right now and all that's happening in the world, and how we are really tending to all of these emotions that are arising in our bodies. What I typically love to do when I start a Zoom call is to do what I call a call to fellowship, which means that we take a moment to look in and to see who's in all of these little boxes, to get a sense of intimacy and connection and relationship. And so even though we're on a webinar today, I think that we can still feel into the presence, into the felt sense of those who are on this call with us. And so maybe you want to take a moment and rest your eyes. And maybe this is the first time you've been able to take a moment and rest your eyes in the middle of the day for a really long time. and seeing if you can feel the felt sense of support around you, of these other beings who heard the call, they read the call to this webinar and said, that sounds like something I need to be a part of. Oftentimes, when we're feeling strong emotions, we think that we're the only ones. And so there's something very loving and supportive to know that we're not the only ones. Perhaps you want to bring a hand to the heart or to the belly. Taking a breath in and letting that breath go. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes once again and just arrive again. So, where I am physically today, I'm in my home. I live in Bridgeport, Connecticut with my partner, Christina. And we're also surrounded by a bunch of boxes because we are about to move. My emotional state, let's see, I've cried twice today, once during a meeting, which was fine. And when I thought I was apologizing to my girlfriend this morning, what I actually was doing was showing up with a bunch of kerosene and then like a lighter and just lit things up to kind of make our fight continue and get even bigger than it was before. So that's where I am right now. And even though I slept for 8 hours last night, I woke up just feeling bone tired. I've had 2 cups of tea and some coffee, and I'm just feeling this heaviness, this is beyond sleepy. It's just restlessness, it's heaviness, it's sloth and torpor, for those of you who are familiar with that term. So is any of that feeling familiar to anybody out there? Or maybe something in between or a combination of all of those things? So we are living in incredibly tender and vulnerable times right now. We have never lived through a global pandemic at this magnitude in relationship and on top of this racial uprising that has been 400 years in the making. And on top of that, we're also homeschooling. We are working multiple jobs, or we're not working at all. We're getting cancer diagnoses and we're bringing new life into this world. We're trying to figure out how to care and nurture our aging parents when we can't physically be close to them or touch them. And we're breaking up and we're getting married. And so we are living within the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. There is nothing that is being left behind right now. And for many of us, we're holding all of these complexities at the same time. And so, with all that being said, dear ones, I ask you, how is your heart today? So, how is your heart today? Is there constriction and tightening? Is there heaviness? Is there sadness? Is it full of effervescent bubbles? Is there joy today? So, what is the quality of your heart? And then, how is that also? How is the body responding? How is the mind responding? A few months ago, I reached out to my dear Sylvia Borstein, who I often call when I'm having to give talks and things are very tough. And Sylvia said that no matter how heartbreaking the world is, that there isn't a moment where we can't continue to deepen our wisdom, to deepen our compassion, and to continue to cultivate an open heart. And with that, there is this invitation to turn towards what is true. How is this emotional body? How is my mental state? Are we finding time to really pay attention, to listen deeply to not what we want it to be, but actually what it is? And are we finding the time, the energy, the space, the capacity to turn towards them and to tend to them? So, chitta is a Pali word, and it refers to this momentary combination of our emotions and our mental activity. And so these two combinations make up the momentary experience of one's life. So, for example, we might be aware that there is the emotion of anger that is arising in my body. So I know this felt sense of my body, and I know how that's manifesting for me. And so I also know that there's an element of fire. So I'm also feeling heat. I'm also feeling a contraction or a tightness. And so this is how I know it's showing up in my body. And then I might notice that I might want to explore the mental quality of chitta, this emotion of anger arising in my body. And so I might realize that was actually underneath the strong emotion of anger, or insert your own strong emotion, actually could be this felt sense of shrunkenness, of not being seen, of not being heard, of my experience not being validated. And so this perspective, this clarity can really change our perspective on our anger, on our other strong emotions that are arising in the body. And it can really ask us to shift how we are responding. Instead of this shutting down and pushing away, we're actually getting curious and leaning in a little bit more. So there's this ask to be with patience, with intimacy, to know this body in a deeper way, to know this body, this mind, this heart. And so chitta gives us this opportunity to pause and to turn towards. And so, in my own lived experience over these few months, my emotional body has been very active. It has been very alive. And at the beginning, there was nothing at all, or what I felt, what I sensed, or what I experienced as nothing. I felt numbness. I felt nothing. Everything that was happening in the world felt so incredibly overwhelming that I couldn't touch it. I couldn't get near it. I didn't know how to respond. And so I just felt this nothing in my body. And that might be your experience as well throughout this time. Perhaps that's your experience right now in this moment. And I remember speaking to a teacher, and she said, well, can you feel your feet on the ground? And if you bring your hand to your heart, can you feel the heart beating? And if you bring your hand to your belly, can you feel the breath breathing? And so, with these baby steps, I began to open up to the felt sense of the body, which allowed me then to feel this emotional body beginning to come alive, to be able to give me information of where to go next. And so, after that felt sense of numbing, of nothingness, I moved into being really productive. Like, oh, I did nothing for a week. Now I have to do all these things. I'm catching up. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And I was really, really, really productive. And after that week or so being really, really productive, I got really, really exhausted. And then I got really, really sad. And then I got restless. And I had this energy in my body that I didn't quite know what to do with it, where to move it. And I realized that that was actually grief in my body that was showing up as restlessness. And someone recently said to me that grief is love that has nowhere to go. And so I really love that thought, that grief is love that has nowhere to go. It says to me, this is what I love, and this is what I've lost. So it's really easy for us to get stuck in whatever emotion that we're in right now. And when we get stuck in that emotion, we really allow that emotion to begin to colonize our minds, our hearts, and our bodies. And these strong emotions are information, they're wisdom for us to pay attention to listen to what is trying to teach us and to move towards that breaking apart, that moving towards, that moving into action, whatever that looks like. One of my favorite quotes by Maya Angelou, and she's speaking about anger, but I invite you again to insert whatever strong emotion that you might be feeling. And she says that if you're not angry, insert your own emotion there, you're either a stone or you're too sick to be angry. You should be angry. Now, mind you, there's a difference. You must not be bitter. And let me tell you why. Because bitterness eats upon its host like a cancer and does nothing to the object of its displeasure. So be angry, yes, but you write it, you paint it, you dance it, you march it, you vote it, you talk it, you never stop talking about it. And so she's talking about knowing these strong emotions that are arising in the body and tending to them with care, tending to them with wisdom, tending to them with clear discernment, and moving them into action. And so sometimes that action um, is a sacred pause. So it's asking me to rest. It's asking me to nurture my body by taking a bath. Sometimes that sacred pause is asking me to write, to talk, to share what's happening with other people, to be a shoulder that others lean on so I can be a really deep listener. And so moving through these, tending to these emotions, the answer is right there for us. We just need to invite that sacred pause in and to listen deeply. And for many of us, we might feel like we don't have that time. We don't have the luxury of a sacred pause. Again, many of us are our healthcare providers. Many of us are homeschooling our children. Many of us are caring for someone who's sick. And many of us are just doing the best that we can to really support our mental health and moving through this time together. And so we do what we can. Maybe it's perhaps bringing a hand to the heart and just taking a deep breath. Sometimes it's bringing a hand to the back of the head and to the forehead. And just allowing ourselves to feel held. Sometimes it's calling a friend on the phone and just venting, just allowing that energy to move through our bodies and out. Any of us are living in an environment where it's fine. Maybe we go outside and we scream and we shout and we stomp and we just move that energy through our bodies. But most importantly, we need to remember, we need to recognize it, to know that it's present, and to know that it needs to move through the body. And so let's take a breath together. And before we move into our formal meditation practice together, I invite folks to take a moment to notice the space that they're in right now. Perhaps you're in your home, or maybe you're physically at a job. Maybe you're sitting in a parking lot, hopefully with the air conditioning on. Maybe sitting under the shade of a tree. And I invite you to begin to look around at the environment that you're in. So just turning the head from side to side and noticing what is available to you right now. So we're taking in all the different colors that we might see. Noticing the different shapes that are around us. Noticing if there are elements of nature. So elements of nature could be our pets, could be a house plant, could be the grass under our feet, the tree above our heads. And taking a moment to notice the space above us. The space to the side of us. And also noticing the space that is in front of us and the space that is behind us. And as we move into our formal practice, I also invite you to take whatever posture works best for your body. If the body is comfortable seated, you can take a seated posture, whether it's on a couch, a chair, on a cushion. If there is sleepiness in the body, perhaps you take a posture of standing meditation. If the body is restless and there's a lot of energy, perhaps you want to take this as a walking meditation practice. And if the body is feeling bone tired, if the body is feeling exhausted and needs to be held and witnessed by the earth, perhaps you take this as a lying down practice. And so I invite you to find ease and comfort in this body right now. We'll begin to rest the eyes. And for some people, resting the eyes means to keep the eyes open with a soft gaze. For others, resting the eyes means to look down to a spot on the floor. And for others, resting the eyes means to keep the eyes closed, so resting the top lid on top of the bottom lid. And how is the body? How is this body today? This earth element that is resting on earth. Noticing where there is contact of this earth resting on earth. Noticing the heaviness of our bones. The bottoms of our feet connecting to the earth, feeling the four corners of the bottoms of our feet rooting down, being held by the earth. If we're resting in a chair, on a couch, or lying on the earth, can we feel the back body breathing into the earth as it holds us? And so how is this body as it's making contact with the earth? As it's resting on the earth? As it's being witnessed by the earth? As it's being held by this earth? Feeling the gravity rooting this body down. And in this stillness, we might feel this movement of our body. So perhaps this movement is coming from a gentle rocking as we breathe the breath in and breathe the breath out. Perhaps this movement comes from feeling the expansion in the contraction in this body. Maybe the movement is known through the mind as it's creating stories and narratives and lists. So maybe there's a lot of movement happening in the mind. And so, can we find this anchor in our body? Whether it's through the felt sense of the stillness with knowing this body is earth element. Are we finding the sense of rhythm, of the moving of the breath in the body, that pattern of breath moving in and moving out? Are we finding that rhythm also being a way that we can find anchor? This thing that we keep coming back to that allows us to come back to this earth, to come back to this breath, to come back to the tangible things that are present right now. And we might notice that this tenderness, this emotional body might be showing itself, might be present right now. And we don't want to go looking or searching for this emotional body. As many of us know, it arises when it's ready to arise. And it's important for us to move at the speed of trust, to not go searching or excavating, but just to know, oh, this tenderness is arising. And so maybe there is no emotional body that is arising today. Maybe the body is just feeling a sense of stillness, and wherever you are is exactly where the body, the mind, the heart is supposed to be right now. So maybe we are noticing the absence of. And so without getting caught up in the words, the narratives, or trying to name a specific thought or emotion, we can just be present with the felt sense of the body. So there is a softening and widening into the field of our experience as we see what is present right now. Is there a contraction? Is there a tightness? Is there heat? Is there cold? Is there stillness? Is there a vibration? Is there a dampness or a dryness? Is there a color, a taste, a felt sense of what is arising to the body? And we keep moving back to that anchor. knowing that it is the nature of the emotional body to arise, to hang out for a moment, and then to fade. And perhaps a new emotion arises to take its place. And it hangs out for a moment. And it moves and it swirls throughout our bodies. And the body responds. The body clenches. The body sleeps. The body cries. The body screams. The body gets silent. And we allow it to pass through the body. We release it, knowing that it'll probably come back again. And that's fine. That's what this emotional body does. And we know it, we recognize it. But we don't allow it to colonize our hearts and our minds and our bodies. We don't allow these strong emotions to put their flag in us, to set up residency, to become who we are. We don't become a person who is sad, a person who is rageful, a person who is fearful, a person who is angry. We become a person with a healthy emotional life, who experiences rage, who experiences sadness, who experiences fear, who experiences anger, who experiences joy and happiness, and to know that these states are not permanent, that it is their nature to arise and to pass away. So we don't cling, we don't grasp onto. We know them, we see them for what they are, as impermanent. We know them because we feel them in our bodies. We know them because the body expands or it contracts, because the body feels vibration, or there are butterflies in the belly, or a lengthening in the spine. We know it through the body, a clenching of the hands. That's how we know. And we know these strong emotions as they move through, how they shape shift. And we move back to our anchor. We know the body at homeostasis, at stillness, at equipoise or at equanimity. And then we see what arises again. And so we explore, we play around, we get curious about what's happening in our practice, about what is moving through our bodies and how we know. What is the mind's response to this emotional body? And how do we know this momentary experience? And whenever a strong emotion is moving through this body, is it feeling like a big mass, or is it beginning to break apart for us to be able to see the sum of its parts? Again, sometimes when we're feeling these big, strong emotions, they just feel like this one big lump that we can't seem to move or to penetrate or to know. So we turn towards it and we say, I know that you're not just anger. I know that you're not just fear or sadness or insert any other emotion. I know there's something else to this, another piece to this. So I'm just going to chip away a little bit at the corner to see what else is there, what else needs to be known, what is asking my attention to be brought to, what needs to be tended to, what needs to be nurtured and nourished, what needs to be known, what needs to be seen, what needs to be heard. And how is the body? Is gravity still tethering this body to the earth? Can we drop in a little bit deeper, allowing the earth to really hold, to bear witness to this body resting upon it? And how is the breath? Is the breath moving? Is it flowing? Is there a rhythm? Or is the breath shallow? Is it tight? Is it constricted? So we're just acknowledging, we're just noticing what's arising in the body, how the breath is responding. And how is your heart, dear one? And so, how is this heart? And what about now? And how about now? Perhaps we bring a hand to the heart or a hand to the belly. We know this heart beating. We know this breath breathing. We know what's happening right now in this present moment. And when you feel complete, you can bring the body and the mind back to this present moment. It doesn't mean that you leave your meditative presence behind, but you just bring your awareness forward, still knowing the quality of the heart, mind, and the body as we bring our awareness, as we close down our formal meditation practice. So thank you so much for your practice. And so, my favorite part of sharing practice is to open up the floor to what my dear friend Bonnie Duran refers to as wisdom democracy. So, an opportunity for us to not just ask questions, but to really share our wisdom, to share what came up for us, to share our experiences, to share this new knowing with everyone else. And I find that when people have a question or an inquiry or something that they're like, huh, that's new. If they say it out loud, you'll have 10, 20 other people that are like, yeah, that's also my question too. And so being in this Q&A time or opening up into wisdom democracy, just knowing that because we are so interconnected and that we belong to each other, so that what our question is might be the question of many other people. So it's an act of generosity to open up and to share what's alive for you in this moment, and also knowing that there's a vulnerability in this as well. So I believe that either Monique or Amy will be taking your questions.
Yes.
And yeah.
Thank you, Booker. We have a question from Christina Bernardino. Today you asked, how is your heart feeling today? Are there other questions you have that would help to create space for mindfulness with high school students?
Mm, yeah, that's a really great question. And my friend Brian Simmons, who is a dean at a high school in New York City, does a thing online for high school kids, and it is called, I'm forgetting right now. I'll think about it in a moment, but he does this really great offering, and he's invited myself and Sharon Salzberg and Joanna Hardy to come in and speak to high school kids. It's a really beautiful thing. It's Food and Finance High School, so you can look that up. And with working with young people, with working with anybody, I always invite them to find out what's true for them, to ask, to figure out what the right question is for them. Um, when things are prescribed, it's not ours. And when something isn't ours, we don't tend to go back and utilize it. And so, in working with young people, I think it's really great to share with them the felt sense or the experience that you want to move through, normalizing that having an emotional body, a tender body is is something that is just what a healthy body does, to have emotions, to have fear, to have anger, and to ask them how they know when they are moving towards that. Asking them if it's leading them towards suffering or leading them towards liberation. Asking them if it's leading them towards connection to another person or if it's moving away from connection. And so throwing a few thoughts out like that can invite them to begin to think about what it is for them. For some people, it's very embodied. For some people, it's a temperature in the body, it's a shutting down. For some people, is when they feel really generous to another person, that's how they know that they're open. And so invite them to find that question that's relevant for them. And that's for all people, not just young people. But it's really important for us to know what our question is is this true? Because sometimes we also lie to ourselves in our practice, right? So is this true? And actually just, is this true? Thank you for that.
Thank you. Chelsea asks, can you speak to numbness and exhaustion? I feel like I'm been numbed.
Yeah. And numb, that felt sense of numbness, of feeling nothing, of feeling no emotions, that felt sense of um, like there's just nothing that you can touch. And for a lot of us, that is our body's way of protecting us. And so I don't want us to feel like I feel numb, therefore something's broken. Numb most of the time is our body being like, this is too much to handle right now. And I'm just gonna like shut it down for a minute so you can get your rest. So you can um, find a space to move some energy through so that you can have um, so that you can kind of find that stillness to ask yourself what's alive right now, what's happening to this body. And I also invite you to look at the spaces in between, because often we say, I have fear, I have anger, I am numb, but that's not what our experience is all the time. There's often, maybe the more majority of the time, we're feeling these strong emotions, but noticing when there's an absence of, noticing when you burst into laughter, or noticing when you get overwhelmed and a tear comes down your face, noticing when you get enraged about something that you see on the news. So these are moments when there isn't numbness. And so I invite you to really turn towards and be aware of it so we don't get caught in this narrative that I am numb, I don't feel anything ever. That just might be the predominant emotion, but it's not the only one that's arising for you. And I hope that's clear.
Thank you very much, Booker. Nancy asks, how will the future retreat be similar or different from this meditation? I believe she might be speaking about the upcoming August 1st
Yeah,
virtual.
yeah. So that's a really great question. And the retreat, first of all, we're going to have a full day together, which is going to be really gorgeous. And so we will be digging in a little bit more to Chitta, this emotional body. Um, and the beautiful thing about the retreat is that we're actually going to be able to see each other. So we'll be a lot more interactive. You'll be able to be in small groups, so to have intimate conversations with other people. There'll be some embodiment, so some movement. We'll be tapping into some somatic experience techniques that allow us to know the felt sense of moving energy through the body. Um, yeah, and there'll be a lot more wisdom democracy, and so it'll be a lot more interactive. There also will be some journaling, and we'll have a 2-hour lunch break. And so during that time, I will also invite you to take walking meditation practice, to take a yoga class, just to be able to move the energy through the body. I'll also be asking you during that 2-hour lunch break to be in a sacred pause. So maybe even taking a nap, which I know is very risque for some people, but I'm a really big fan of nap ministry. And there's something about, space and rest, which is so important. And so our time together in our retreat is going to feel much more spacious. And there's going to be time for us to unpack things in real time. So thank you for asking. And I hope that you all join us on the retreat on
Thank you,
August
Booker.
1st.
Yes, wisdom, democracy, love that. Okay. Someone asks, what if that body energy remains in anger or sadness because of repercussions of sexual abuse?
Yeah. And again, that is a heavy question. And without knowing who you are as the individual, without knowing um, how you're being supported, whether it's through a therapist or other words, I feel very hesitant to give any concrete advice around that. It wouldn't be an integrity for me to do so. Um, and and what I would say is to again acknowledge when it's not present, acknowledging when the energy is moving through the body, um, acknowledging when there are breakthroughs. Again, if with any sort of trauma, and right now we are living in a global trauma. And then people are already coming with our existing traumas. I'm speaking for myself as well. And so things can feel even more exacerbated at this time. And so this is a time when we're really, it's so integral for us to really turn towards getting additional support and nourishment. This might not be the best time to sit in a formal meditation practice, meaning to have the eyes closed and go inwards. I know for myself, that has felt very unsafe at times. It has felt absolutely not the right medicine during this time. And so my meditation practice currently is looking like doing a lot of walking meditation, doing a lot of yoga, doing a lot of practices that are just moving energy through my body. And so I really encourage, if there is new traumas that are in the body, or existing traumas that are really wearing up, to really move the body as much as possible and to get as much support as you can from professionals.
Thank you, Booker. Jude asks similarly, can you speak about grief, not necessarily specific loss, but sense of loss that is so present now?
Yeah, and grief is one of those things that shows up in everybody's body in a different way. And so grief is one of those things, sort of like doubt, where we can't quite recognize it. Like, there's this gnawing feeling in my body. I can't quite put my finger on it. And for a lot of us, that is grief. When it feels intangible, when it feels like that's not working, that's not working, that's not working, it's sometimes just grief. And it's important for us to allow ourselves to feel that. And I want to acknowledge that not everybody has the luxury of having 5, 10, 20 minutes, an hour of downtime to themselves. I get that. But I am asking that we turn towards in those moments where there is space. So before we get out of bed, to just be with the felt sense in the body and saying, oh, no, grief is arising. I know grief. And to not push it away, but to hold it close, because when these strong emotions are rising in the body, they're asking something of us. They're asking us to pay attention, to nurture it, to support it and moving through. So the one thing that I can say about any of these emotions is to be with the question of what's needed, what is needed.
Thank you, Booker. Can you speak about what your daily practice looks like?
Yes. You know, I feel hesitant saying this, but it's true. I don't have a daily sitting meditation practice. As I mentioned earlier, it's something that I really strived to do for many years, and there are moments where my sitting practice is very solid and feels very useful, and there are times where it doesn't feel useful. And there's a discernment, right? So there is, am I sitting and there's agitation and I don't want to be agitated? And that's not what I'm speaking of. So I can sit with agitation and knowing, oh, agitation is arising, oh, anger is arising, frustration is arising. I can know that in my practice. But for my personal body, the way that I'm made, I have a lot of energy in my body. And so for me, it's really useful to move energy through my body before I try a formal practice. And so it looks like riding my bike, it looks like practicing yoga, it looks for going for walks. And it's been very difficult. The past 2 months, I've been on crutches. And so it's been, walking with crutches and listening to the rhythm of my crutches. And so, like, sound meditation has been a really beautiful practice right now. Um, Lying down meditation and feeling my body resting has been another way that my practice has been showing up right now. We live near the beach, and so going to the ocean and really opening up my sense doors to smell the ocean at low tide, or to see the horizons, or listening to the waves flash up against the rocks. So opening up the sense doors has been another way that I've been really working with my meditation during this time. And so our practice um, can be so many things. But for me, my practice is always rooted in my physical body and in my sense doors. So I go back to that first foundation of mindfulness, which is mindfulness of breath and body. So that's always, the foundation of all of my practices. And I'd love to know what your practice is, but we're in a webinar, so I can't ask you that. But if you come to the to our retreat on August 1st, we can be in more relationship with each other and see what's alive for everyone.
Thank you, Booker. That's all the time we have left for questions. Do you have any final words for us? Final words of wisdom?
I just invite everyone, when we begin to really turn towards our emotional body, to move at the speed of trust. We don't need to go looking for our emotional body. It's there. And so if things feel really overwhelming, if things are flooding, we don't have to go into the depth of it. We can keep coming back to the felt sense, to our anchor, and just titrate. So moving towards it, getting curious about it, and then moving back to our anchor. So we don't need to take a huge bite of it, just a little tiny bit at a time.
Thank you so much. I wrote that, moving in the speed of trust. Love that so much. Well, that's our time. Thank you again. And I will take the last minute. Thank you, Booker, for being with us, and for everyone who joined us in this gathering. And as mentioned, Booker is holding a virtual retreat on Saturday, August 1st. Please visit Garrison Institute to sign up. And we'll post in the chat box Booker's other upcoming events. One this Thursday with C-Mind, in fact. Our next session is also this Thursday, July 23rd, with Lori Anderson and Jonathan Rose. Please keep checking garrisoninstitute.org for updated listings of future sessions and to view the recordings of past webinars. Again, we provide these sessions free of charge. If you would like to support this effort, please consider making a donation at garrisoninstitute.org. May everyone be happy, healthy, and safe. Thank you.